Welcome to another edition of The Learning Journey. Wayne Heinzen is my name. I am your host once again for this first episode of Season 2. Caleb Bjorem is our guest. He joins us. Hey, Caleb, welcome to The Learning Journey.
G'day, Wayne. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I am doing very, very well. Now, you're joining us from Cairns because you are, I think this is correct, Manager of Strategic Partnerships and Resourcing with MAF International. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Exactly. A bit of an ostentatious title, but just helps to open doors.
Yeah. All right. So what I want to do, I want to start here. What does it all mean? What does it mean to be the Manager of Strategic Partnerships and Resourcing? Because it sounds pretty good, but what in reality, what does it look like?
Essentially, with the new strategic development department being put together, obviously our intention is to take work that was sort of sitting with a lot of different parties and really sort of hone it into one area of focus that we can sort of try and push this forward. So for me, I came on board primarily looking at the partnership side of things. So we've sort of said to ourselves as MAF in the past, there's lots of people doing little bits of partnerships around the world, but actually there's probably sort of a bulk of work to be done there actually to sort of pull it all together into one piece and to say actually there's a lot of impact, I think, that we might have sort of come very close to, but not quite achieved in the past because, you know, we're sort of working with partners, but actually not seeing where there's overlap, where we could actually be more closely aligned and achieve something together. When I came on board, the institutional funding piece came up at the same time. So there's a bit of an overlap there. And so obviously that's something which is a goal of MAF is to sort of try and transition a little bit more towards institutional funding space to try and augment our traditional funding. And it's a little bit different, to be honest, Wayne, from what we've done in the past. And so I think for some people, they say, yep, you beauty, let's do it. And other people say, oh, it's a little bit different to what we're used to. Once you're chasing institutional funding, there's a little bit of a need to sort of go along with what their interest is, you know, rather than us sort of saying, here's what we'd like to do, will you fund it? Which obviously is great. Sometimes we have the need to say, actually, what they're doing is great and we could help them. And that's where the funding lies. And so it means pivoting a little bit. But yeah, basically, it's a big scope working right across the world, as many people do, but trying to sort of push both those pieces forward and see what opportunities God opens up for us.
I want to know for you, because you started with MAF about 4 years ago, I think, as a human resources officer, and now you've moved into your new role in strategic partnerships and resourcing. So I want to know, how did you have to pivot, maybe professionally and personally? What were the things that were very, very different in the new role where you kind of had to get your head around it and you had to, I'm guessing, learn a whole lot of new stuff that wasn't really part of your role as the HR officer?
Well, it's a great question, Wayne. And it's funny because I think when I first joined MAF, we interviewed by Pam Wonderly, who was my line manager before I was working for Stephen. And she said to me in the interview, she said, looking at your resume, you've done a whole bunch of different things over your life. Sort of what's going on there? Like, you know, can we expect you to stick around for a long time? I thought, no, it's a fair question. It's a fair question. But I said to her, and I feel like a moment of inspiration, I thought it was quite a good answer, but just sort of came to me in the moment, but it's true. I said to her, look, the what that I do has been different my life, through my whole life, but the why has always been exactly the same. And I think when we serve God with our lives, without trying to sort of, you know, be too preachy here, I think that it's inspiring to see the way that God can sort of take all the different skill sets you have and sort of lead you on this, what can be a confusing path, but I think still towards achieving the same goal. Like my background is development. I studied development. That's always been my interest and my passion, and especially the nexus between missions and development. I really believe that, you know, the best development work is done by Christians and the best missions work is done when we incorporate development aspects into it. And so previous to MAF, I was working in a role where I sort of had a very broad role as a country manager overseas. And so part of that was human resources. So when I came to MAF and saw the human resources role there, I thought, you know, beauty. I really love working with people, helping people, serving people. And that's what I really want to do. And so sort of engaging that part of my, I suppose, interest and skill set for a number of years. But this conversation about strategic development had sort of come up pretty early on. I think in the first year I was here, I'd sort of started to talk with Bill and Vaughan and Steve and others about it, just about the concept of it coming together. When it sort of came to pass that this new department, sort of was birthed, I thought, I've got to be part of that. It just sounds so fascinating and really right up my alley. To a certain degree, you're putting down some things and picking other things back up. And so for me, I find the strategic element of it in terms of, you know, traditional strategic thinking really, really interesting. Looking at it from like a global perspective and seeing actually how can we sort of take what we do and apply that at a global level, or sort of, you know, try and take these relationships or the funding opportunities, whatever it is, and sort of that fascinating piece of connecting all the dots. It's like, you know, in those movies where you have the crazy guy that has like all the pieces of red string up on the board, and it's kind of like, this funny opportunity can connect with this strategy over here, which connects with our policy over there and this partner.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on the fact that you were a country manager. I think it was in Cambodia, if memory serves me correct. I'm wondering from, the almost 3 years that you spent in Cambodia, what has carried forward to your role now? Because often in a particular moment or particular season, we can think, well, what we're doing now is only for this moment of time. But somewhere down the track, 5 years, 10 years, 3 years, whatever it might be, God actually says, well, you know what you learnt way back there in Cambodia, Caleb? Now I need you to use that in this new role that I'm placing you in.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the learning from that time in Cambodia is just massive. When that opportunity came up, we were just absolutely stoked, over the moon to have something like that to sink our teeth into. So my wife and I went over and sort of took that on together working for Outland Denim. We were just keen to get involved in the work over there. And we sort of was like, before we knew it, we were country managers, and it wasn't necessarily our intention, but as often happens with these things, a lot of math people would relate to that. You find yourself in a position of leadership just because there's a deficit of other skilled people. But it meant then that sort of coming in as a young bloke who just sort of thought, I don't have all that much to offer, but I have my faith and I'll just do my best. Coming out of it after 3 years, completely transformed the way that I sort of approached my work, the way that I saw myself as a professional, the way that I approach things. It was a business as mission organization. I was someone that was raised to sort of, shun the business as mission folks as sort of the heathens, so to come full circle and go, actually, there's a huge amount of great work that can be achieved in this space, and actually be an advocate for business as missions now. There was so much that I learned. Yeah, I mean, just leading people, leading operations, the sort of the way that you have to execute in that sense, because it was manufacturing, right? Working in manufacturing, you can't have an off day. You can't just sort of say, well, we didn't get there today. It's like, you've got to get things over the line. If you don't meet those deadlines, then everything goes up in smoke. And so just huge pressures to deal with. And so, I mean, coming into a new role, I mean, one of the biggest things I think was just the fact that when we came out of it, and it's proved to be true thus far, we'll see what God has for us in the future. We said to ourselves, I couldn't imagine something more stressful. It's a whole different story, but just the level of stress. And again, I think that many people listening will be able to understand that in country of sort of professional stress and spiritual stress and family stress and, work stress and like stuff from the top and from the bottom, and just, oh my goodness. And we sort of had a new baby. And so learning to be a parent, it was just the absolute pinnacle of stress. And so we came back to Cairns. We went, my goodness, this is so relaxing. Like, even on the stressful days, and you do have some stressful days in HR, it was like, this is great. Like, I'm just, going home, not sweating at all. This is beautiful. Yeah. So I think a lot of those skill sets are carried forward. And to be honest, Wayne, I think the biggest thing was you ask God for lessons in life, and you have to sort of be careful. And I've said to people now, like, I'm careful now when I pray to God to teach me things, because I know that he will answer that prayer, but oftentimes it's not an easy process. And you go, hang on, actually, let's hang up the boots and the teaching for a little while, because I think I'm a bit weary of the lesson. So let's just catch my breath before the next one. But I'd always sort of said to God, like, I want to be someone that can sort of take things in my stride and just be, someone that trusts you. And so I think in Cambodia, there was certainly a lot of chance for that, just to sort of learn resilience and learn to sort of take things in my stride, perhaps more than I'd intended. It's allowed me to come forward, I think, with a more appropriate sort of humility and a way to sort of approach my work and see it as God's work, and not get caught up in thinking I'm doing this in my own strength.
Yeah. Hey, one thing I've noticed as I've talked to people on the learning journey is that there are a lot of people that are in roles and positions within MAF where there is a high volume of stress. There is a lot that needs to be done. There's a feeling of there's never enough time to get it all done. So I wonder, from, your time in Cambodia, you just touched on the fact that it was high stress. How did you learn to manage? And, are there lessons maybe from your journey with regards to that season that might be beneficial to someone who's within the organization and feels that stress on a regular basis?
For sure. Yeah, look, I think there's a number of things. I mean, I think first and foremost, so I was raised in a beautiful Christian home. I have two Christian parents. My old man was a minister, and mum's a GP, but someone with a really strong faith, and always sort of saw that as a mission. And so I had just an incredible blessing to have that upbringing. And one of the things that my folks taught me was to turn to God in those times of stress. And I mean, it's something which sounds a bit trite when you haven't learned how to do it, and you think, oh yeah, that's all good and well. But in actual fact, I think if you can put down that sense of frustration of going, well, I prayed to God and I haven't been relieved of this stress, so what's the point of this? If you can actually sort of put that down and just, I think, have a humility in the way that you pray to God. I found that prayer just to be something that God has always blessed. When I say, God, I need your peace, which passes, human understanding. It's not something I can do in my own strength, but I know that you have a peace. And as I say, God's always been really faithful to answer that prayer, which is something I appreciate immensely. And so I think that's the first thing, is you have to sort of say, look, we serve a God of love and peace who cares for us, and he doesn't want us to be stressed out of our brains. He wants us to actually be able to do the work well. And so I think just taking that a step back to sort of take a breather, take a moment with God, start your day there. But then practically as well, I think it's something which again, starting with people, starting with relationships. It's so easy to look at a to-do list and just think this is insurmountable and, think, oh, like this person's probably stressed out with me that I haven't done this and that person's waiting for something. But actually just to go and talk to them, have a conversation together, they're probably stressed out as well. And I think God gives us the blessing of a community of people around us who are all trying to achieve the same thing, hopefully. And I think that actually you get through those stressful times by actually building a relationship with the people around you and sort of being able to walk through that together. And that for me, I think is the biggest legacy I found coming out of my time in Cambodia is actually relationships that you build. And even when the stress has gone away, you can sit with the people, with whom you walked and say, hey, remember how we came through that stressful time together and how God blessed us there? Or, non-Christian mates I was working with over there who they can just sort of, if they can see you walk through and say, hey, how are you feeling so peaceful about this? This is a stressful situation. Just saying, look, I just trust God. End of the day, the work that we're doing is God's work. It's not my work. And so I think, yes, we have responsibilities on a job profile that we have to fulfill. But at the end of the day, I really believe in this concept of Missio Dei, that we're doing God's work and we're doing God's mission. And it's a privilege for us to do that. But I think that each day, if we're faithful to God, he'll give us the resources, both emotionally, physically, that we need to achieve that. So hopefully that doesn't sound too trite, but I really think that it comes down to the way that you approach it and the way that you sort of, see it from a spiritual lens.
Yeah. I think also one of the things that you sort of touched on was the importance of actually talking to someone about it. In the organisation, we work in teams, and teams are so very important. I think, very much that is biblically based, in terms of how the kingdom of God works. But you sort of touched on the fact that, don't keep it bottled up inside. Don't think you have to deal with that stress by yourself. Actually, find someone in the program or in the team that you work and actually have those conversations. And I think sometimes just being able to verbalize how you're feeling is so very, very important.
Oh, 100%. And that's the thing that's crazy, right? I think that, but speaking from a Western perspective, once you've lived overseas, as you would know, sort of in different cultures, you realize we're so wildly individualistic. It's actually insane. We're taught by society sort of pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and achieve something in your own strength and have a big plaque that has your name on it. It's a load of rubbish. I think it really doesn't make any sense, and it's not biblical. And it's not how we were created. We're supposed to live in community and we're supposed to help each other. And I think the first thing you've got to do is just talk to someone. I was really blessed to have a spouse walking with me, and so I could always turn to her, but also, to have mates. And honestly, I would say this might be a perspective thing. Some people might feel differently, and that's totally fine. But I think we tend to sort of say, well, it has to just be, my most trusted sort of colleagues. But actually, I would say go and find friendships outside of MAF, not because there's anything wrong with MAF people, but people who all share the same stresses. You can only make so much progress there. But I think I found the most helpful thing was actually sitting with people from other organizations. And to be perfectly honest, in these circles, when you're living outside of your own culture, you don't have a large support network. You might just be a bunch of broken people sitting together talking about how broken you feel. But actually, that's something which I think is really helpful, just to say, hey, look, I'm not the only person doing this. An old mate from this organization over here, or that person from that organization over here, they're going through the same issues, just with a different organization. It turns out that's just cross-cultural living. And that's just the nature of the work we do. It's incredibly impactful, but it's not easy. It's that stoicism of waking up and saying, whatever I do today, it's not going to be easy. And I shouldn't expect it to be easy. But you know what? I'm just going to give it my best crack and then sit down at the end of the day and talk with people that I trust and, build a relationship with and say, hey, did you have a rough day? Yeah, me too. But hey, that's all right, because we're doing our best and we'll get up and give it a crack again tomorrow.
I wonder, Caleb, sitting down with those non-Christian people, having those conversations, what did you kind of learn about people in general? Because I think sometimes, when you work in a Christian organization, you go to church, the danger can be that we're in the Christian bubble. And I think it's so great, that suggestion of, well, maybe find someone outside of MAF that you can actually talk to and have those conversations. But what did you kind of learn, having those conversations just generally about people?
Probably one of the encouraging things is to see, when we talk to other Christians, obviously we have a shared language, but it's almost like there's kind of blind spots. You're not necessarily aware of what you look like from the outside. But when you talk to non-Christians especially, I think you can see very quickly what they see from the outside, both the good and the bad. And so sometimes, they might see things and they think, oh, all you Christians look a bit crazy for this reason or that reason. You think, okay, well, either that could be really unfair and maybe they're wrong and they should pull their head in, or maybe actually what they're saying is true and I could adjust my message to make it more palatable to allow others to sort of access the message. But also on the positive side of things, so I had a really good Turkish mate in Cambodia who was a Muslim, still is, although he did take a Bible from me, which is good. So I hope, pray that he'll read that. But one of the things for him, he just said, mate, I cannot believe how sold out you are for the cause. You're just so passionate about what you're doing. it's obvious that there's something that motivates you that other people don't have. And he sort of said when he first arrived, he said, this work is hard. He's like, but the reason I'm sticking around is because this motivation that you have for the work, it's inspiring. And it's something which as Christians, we go, oh yeah, well, of course, that's the inspiration that comes from the gospel. Like we know that we're serving God, so that's inspiring. But I think as a non-Christian, he could sort of see that. And that was something that sort of excited him and inspired him. And so I think it's kind of cool to go, okay, actually, yeah, take a step back and go, I wouldn't have seen that if I wasn't talking to a non-Christian mate. But actually, the fact that he could sort of see that from the outside allows me to go, hey, if that's something that inspires other people, I probably should do more of that. Like if that's something which helps people to come closer to God, I probably should, talk that up. And so that became sort of a feature then of the way that I approached conversations with sort of all sorts of people coming and wanting to learn about organization, Christians, non-Christians, government, NGOs, whatever, to approach from an angle of being like, you know what, I'm going to inspire this person today. This is my job when this person visits, is to teach them about the organization, but to inspire them and to see them walk out of those conversations just inspired in general, to go, wow, there's so much good that can be done in this world. Go, great, that's a good day in the office. Even if there's still a few to-do list items that didn't quite get done, if I've inspired someone, I think that's a step closer to them sort of understanding their place in the world and the plan that God has for them. So yeah, I think you can see those things. Whereas when you're stuck in your own bubble, dare I say, you just don't quite have the same perspective, I think.
Yeah. So do you find that experience and what you kind of learnt through that in terms of people observing your faith by how you speak, how you interact with them, what they see in you, do you find that is helpful now? Because you deal with like government ministers and heads of different organizations, people that are fairly high up in terms of a worldly structure. Is it translating across in your current role as strategic partnerships and resourcing manager?
Definitely. And I mean, there's something, again, which is sort of a passion of mine, I suppose, Wayne. Like I think growing up, in the pews watching my dad preach every week, he's a great preacher. And I saw a lot of preachers come through the ranks. And the thing that I thought to myself was, watching preachers that came through the ranks and had life experience probably had a more effective message than those that sort of at 18 decided to become a youth minister and sort of jump straight into it. And to be honest, I think God can use both in amazing ways. But I remember having this sort of bargain or a conversation with God. I said, God, I reckon I could do that one day if you want me to. But I said, I'd like to get some life experience first. I'd like to understand what the world, how it works first, so that actually if I was ever to try and talk to people, I could talk to them from a range of different perspectives. And I think I've always sort of carried that idea forward of going, actually, hang on, if we take a step back to someone that hasn't been raised in the church, how does Christianity look? How does what we do appear to them? And so I think that's exactly what I do in my role today, is to sort of approach these politicians and go, okay, so I know, we would see ourselves as a bunch of missionaries serving God in that way. But honestly, a lot of people sort of, especially my age and younger, they don't even know what the word missionary means. So if you say you're a missionary, they go, I have no idea what you're saying. That's absolutely about trying to translate the message of what we do and think about what they're hearing, what they're seeing, what they're receiving. How can I present what we do in a way that actually is inspiring to them, as opposed to putting a block in the way? And again, I think what you find, which is encouraging, is that most often, if you can just sort of put it in their language, then they go, oh, fantastic, man, you guys are amazing. The number of times that I've heard in the last year, like, why have I never heard of MAF? Because I think we sort of get ourselves confused and say, oh, well, you wouldn't understand what we do. It's a bit too confusing. But actually, I think if you just stop and think about, and it's the same when you sort of, evangelizing to people, you just got to think about what are they expecting to hear? What makes sense in their language, irrespective of who they are, what station they're in. And if you can translate it into that, then I think, yeah, it's really encouraging to see people at the highest level kind of go, wow, we're inspired by the work that MAF does. And as I said to you before, I kind of think, oh, look, I hope that this ends in a funding relationship, but even if not, I think that we've sort of moved that chess piece in the kingdom of God a little bit closer. So that's a win.
Yeah. And sadly, we are out of time on the learning journey, but I'm so very thankful that you chose to spend 20 or so minutes with us today. Thanks for sharing your journey, and we wish you a fantastic year ahead.
Thanks very much, Wayne. Pleasure to speak this morning, mate. Have a good one.
It was such a pleasure to chat with Caleb Bjorem, our first guest on season 2 of The Learning Journey. We really hope you gained some valuable insight from this episode of the podcast. Now, there's some exciting news from Learning and Development. Our LMS Elevate has had an upgrade, and to help you navigate the new features, we want you to watch the instructional videos on our SharePoint Elevate page so that you can continue to use Elevate to train and upskill yourself and your team. Now, on the next episode of the podcast, we head to Central Africa and we chat with Sundar Daniel, Country Director of the MAF program in Chad. Looking forward to your company then.